Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Your Voice, Our Morrisville. And today we are going to talk about the sticky subject of the rental inspections, which everyone might be familiar with. Our episode today is part one of a two-part series where we can take a look at this controversial policy and sort of break it down and talk about it piece by piece. It was enacted this year. It was called Ordinance 1019, section 400. So I'm joined by Lee Taylor, who is one of several longtime landlords in Morrisville. This part of a landlord-tenant coalition who are working to sort of resolve this issue, as well as Rebecca, who is a renter here in Morrisville, and Shawn Ratti, a First Ward Borough Council candidate. So thank you all for joining me. And let's just dive right in and start talking about this rental inspection policy. So I'm going to start with you, Lee. Let's start off by addressing one of the major misconceptions about this policy and the coalition that you've put together. A lot of people have been saying, some council members, the borough manager, maybe some other people, that you want to eliminate all inspections of rental properties, including in this ordinance. Is this really what you're looking to do, to just make rental properties free of inspections forever?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. We've been doing UNO, which is use and occupancy inspections, for ever since we started. In 2020, goes way back before that. UNOs are important. They need to be done every time you change tenants, or when you wind up putting in, buying a property, even for a homeowner. So those are critical. What we don't think is correct and good is having annual rental inspections when people are there. So there's a big difference. We don't want to eliminate all inspections. UNOs are important.
So then let's break this down for people who are kind of confused or have been, gotten some misinformation about it, because there's two parts to this. There's, like you said, the use and occupancy, which is when people are buying or selling a home, or when a property, a renter leaves and a new tenant comes in. We've always had that. And then there's this new ordinance and the rental license, which what's the policy is enforcing, which the policy that the borough is enforcing. So first, explain what a UNO is. Let's just start there.
So an UNO happens, as I say, for whenever a property changes hands, and actually one of the inspectors said the problem is that everybody doesn't get a UNO when the property changes hands, even homeowner to homeowner. So that needs to be sharpened up a good bit, which is why we're going to talk about that in the second part. We think the UNO policy needs to be changed because that's very important. And so the UNO happens between either when a property changes hands or if a owner gets a new tenant that comes in. So the owner fixes up the property if it needs any repairs, and then he has the UNO done, the use and occupancy and permit. And if there's any problems, the inspector says, well, you need to fix this, you need to do that. But it's up to snuff. So the UNO ensures that the property is up to snuff, up to code, and everything's ready to go. The key thing that is to remember is a UNO is always done when the property is empty. So the property's got to be empty when it's done. Now, the only difference might be if a landlord is buying a property from another landlord or from even a homeowner, and the same tenant, the same occupant is staying in there for the new owner. That might not be open. But for landlords that have tenants, it is always done when the property is vacant, and that's okay. That's good. We should do that.
No, I agree with that. So let me throw this over to Rebecca. You're a tenant here in Morrisville. So can you explain what Ordinance 1019 is and how it's different than a use and occupancy?
Yes, basically the new ordinance is a $100 renter's license that the town tacked onto the landlord that they must file and pay yearly out for the properties on top of the yearly fee. It's required that the property undergo inspection every year, even if it's occupied. And now with this inspection, it's 3 pages long, and the ending line is pretty concerning, being additional items to be corrected must be identified and noted at the time of the inspection, which means it could be failed and forced to do over the inspection again, or really failed for any reason at the inspector's discretion, basically being cleanliness, boxes on the stove, shoes or clothes hanging around, things that you would really find in any home at any time.
Yeah, so and actually, I'll jump in here. Here's the three-page inspection. Got the list right here, and I think you mentioned maybe this is the very bottom of the list on the last page here. I marked it in yellow. It reads, "Additional items to be corrected may be identified and noted at the time of the inspection." So not only do you have the 3 pages, but they can add on anything they want as they're looking at it.
Wow, so that sounds kind of a little arbitrary. So Shawn, you're a borough council candidate. How did this policy suddenly spring up? Like it seemed like it just sort of came out of nowhere. Can you give me some background on that?
I mean, yeah, definitely springing up out of nowhere is how I think most people I've spoken to in town feel about this whole thing. According to the council themselves, at the meetings, the ordinance passed in 2017, but it was determined it was too costly, too difficult to run, so it was shelved due to lack of money and the ability to enforce it. So it just kind of sat dormant, seemed unnecessary at this point. Now the borough has money thanks to the EIT, and this current administration decided, let's use that money on this previously voted thing and dig it back up and start enforcing it as a revenue option. So without any input from the landlords or the tenants, and it was quickly written up, standards thrown in place without any proper consideration, and then its enforcements are even also set in place. So this was dredged up from the past. They pushed that blame back on the previous council, but they're the ones who also dug it up and started reinforcing it and setting these standards. And that's been a concern because all they did was somebody sent a letter out on February 15th, requiring landlords and tenants to submit paperwork by March 31st or get fined. And this completely caught everybody off guard, surprised everyone with no chance to put input on the matter. And with no time taken or any leeway even given, there's not really any chance for anybody to object or even to figure out how to follow up correctly. And I think that confusion's left a lot of people concerned since, the implication went quickly and even punishment set up quickly, but they just keep waving their hands away, going, it's not our fault. No big deal. We just dug it up and set the standards.
Yeah, it feels kind of rushed for something that I think most residents didn't even know about it until this letter showed up in their mailbox. And even then, it was confusing about the letter. I don't think a lot of people realized that this was a yearly inspection. This wasn't like a one-time until the tenant moves out or changes, that it's every year, even if the tenant doesn't change. And I don't even think that they got the town's inspector up there to talk about the inspection and to answer questions until like March or April. And that was well after the letters were sent out and, the $100 was, expected to be paid. So now that the horse is out of the barn on this one, the whole process has started. So what problems have cropped up? I'm going to throw it to you, Lee, as a landlord. What are some of the issues that people are now facing with this?
Well, I guess overall, I'd just like to ask anybody that's listening to here to consider, would you like a borough official to be walking through your property once a year at the cost of $100 to see if you're keeping house good enough and if you've got any code violations? Whether you're a homeowner or a renter, would you want that in your home? And then we finished it this year, again, do it next year, and again, do it the following year. I don't think anybody would want that. And so I'd say the first thing is it's discriminatory. Why pick out renters? Are they supposed to be worse, housekeepers than anybody else or what? It's taking a certain class of citizen, which is our renters, and saying, you're not as good as homeowners. And so we're going to inspect you every year. I'm going to charge $100 to do that. So the discrimination is a real big deal for me. And the second thing is it costs money and it costs time. The tenant, there's a $100 fee. And oftentimes things like that get passed on to the tenant, because the landlord's already got all of his expenses, his money coming in, going out, and, he can't afford necessarily just another $100 for it. So it might get passed on to the tenant. But one of the biggest things is it winds up costing the tenant time because now they've got to be there in order to go through their house. And as a landlord, I am not going to let anybody in the town go through my tenant's house without their permission and them being there. That's not that. So now these people have to take off work or whatever. But probably there's a couple of things. There's a $1,000 fine per day per unit per day on landlords if they don't do that. Now I don't know if they've ever done that, but that's what the ordinance says. $1,000 per unit per day if you don't get your money into them by March 31st or whenever their deadline is. And it also drives investors out of town. I mean, I've talked to a cousin of mine who buys houses and rehabs them and so forth, or keeps them for rentals. He said he won't touch Morrisville anymore. This kind of thing drives. So I put millions of dollars, literally, I mean, far from the bank, but I put millions of dollars in improving houses here in Morrisville. But guys aren't going to do that if they got to put up with this kind of nonsense. And then the last thing, which is really probably the most important to me, is the right of privacy. I served in the military for 26 years. Fourth Amendment means a lot, and the board and the council and some of the other folks made fun of me with, oh, it's not a Fourth Amendment kind of thing. Well, it really is important to me. I mean, the right of privacy is important, and whatever right of privacy you give to homeowners, should give the same thing to tenants. They're not a second-class citizen. So that's a big thing for me.
Right. I mean, I have a rental property, and I know when they did the inspection that there were things that weren't code violations specifically, but more like housekeeping, like we were saying earlier. Like they had a box in the basement that was in front of the electrical panel, and that was one of the things that was listed that had to be moved. And it's like, well, that's a housekeeping issue. That's not really anything having to do with code. But one of the words that you said when you were talking, Lee, sort of grabbed my ear, and that was the word discriminatory.
Yeah.
So can you elaborate on that a little bit more? I know you talked about the right to privacy and the Fourth Amendment, but can you just elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, to me, it's making another class of citizens. I mean, we went through this kind of thing in the civil rights movement with race and so forth. Well, they're just making another class. It's just not based on race. It's based on where you live, and if you have enough money to buy your own place. And you look at the houses in Morrisville, they're going for 300, 350,000. Our kids can't afford houses a lot of times. And a lot of the younger generation is saying, I don't want to buy a house, I want to rent. So, I mean, it's not just, poor people that are doing this. There's a lot of people that need rentals. And so landlords provide a real big service, but to put those people in a separate class that really, sets them aside and says, we're going to do something to you, we're not going to do it to anybody else. That's discrimination to me, I do have the thing. I know you'd asked about the thing itself. I mean, I've got the ordinance right here. I just mentioned a couple of things in it. On the application, it says right here in the ordinance, a list of current or proposed tenants for the calendar year have to be turned in. Now, I don't know how I can propose what tenants are going to have. That's really a ridiculous kind of thing to put in an ordinance, but they got it in there. And they want the tenant's full legal name, any known aliases, of course, the address, and their employment title and their address of their employer, right there in the ordinance. That's what they want. Then it says down here that the borough manager reserves the right to deny issuance of the rental license. So the borough manager's got the choice. He doesn't like what's going on, or you didn't get it 1 year, he can deny it the next year. So it gives him all that power. Then another place here, it says from time to time, by resolution of the Morrisville Borough Council, they can raise how much it is. So $100 a day, but it could be $200 tomorrow, $300, whatever the Borough Council decides they want to make it. The Borough Council, the Morrisville Borough, no later than 30 days after the date the borough mails out the application, you got to get the application back to them, or they start with those fines of $1,000 per day per unit. It's just, there's a bunch of stuff in here that is really severe that shouldn't be in here, and that just bad. Contradictory. Some of it's vague on when things will be done. So it's just overall, there's a lot of bad things and confusing things in this ordinance. But for me, again, it's the right to privacy and the discrimination. You shouldn't be doing this to renters. They don't deserve this any more than homeowners. Let's face it. Some of the homeowners have been in their homes for 30, 40, 50 years without ever anybody walking through them. So if you want to really figure out who has the most safety violations, it's not going to be your tenants, because they're every 3 to 5 years they have to go through. If they're a HUD tenant, It happens every single year. HUD comes in to make sure they're getting the money's worth. So they're doing it every year. So, and one more thing, and then I'll let you move on. But landlords aren't bad people. I mean, two friends of mine who are landlords had like 40 units inspected. Okay, they've been through the program, had 40 units inspected, and out of them, they came with maybe 4 or 5 things that they thought should be changed or done. A couple of things were, I mean, they're all minor, nothing major. The few minor things, a couple of them have been missed during the UNO. That wasn't their fault. That was the UNO, that original UNO. They didn't ask for it. So if it wasn't doing the UNO, why are they doing it now? And a few of them were tenants things, like, the tenant had a cord stretched across the floor or something. And so they got to do that. So, I mean, the violations that they've experienced are relatively slim. So, I mean, one landlord said it's like saying, I think there's a bad sidewalk someplace on this block. So we're going to make everybody on the block replace all their sidewalks. That's ridiculous. And that's what they're doing. They're making everybody doing a lot of stuff because they think there might be a few landlords that want to catch out there.
Right, right. And so I know, Rebecca, you're on a time crunch here. Let me just ask you real quickly. So you're a tenant. How does it feel having this borough official inspection person like walk through your private residence once a year, kind of looking over everything and looking for code violations?
I mean, it's uncomfortable for sure. And I mean, to echo some of the things that Lee said too, you have people and their whole lives and family living in the units or apartments, whatever the case is. It just feels like a big invasion of privacy. I mean, myself, I'm a single person living alone. Like I have to take time off work every time something like this comes up. And with more and more inspections happening, it's not so easy to reschedule them. Reschedule myself, my clients at work. And then, just these repair costs, like again, echoing what Lee said, sometimes it's minor costs, but it's gonna, it's gonna end up on either the tenant or the landlord. And at the end of the day, nobody wants to eat that cost. And especially for these yearly inspections.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth noting too that you have to actually provide a form which gives details for all the tenants who occupy the property. That's typical, but this ordinance added names for children to that list, which is a big deal for me, working in the school district and being a teacher. That this to me feels like it's a requirement that is never had before and nobody really wants. The excuse the council president gave during a meeting was that is to assist the schools. But I spoke with people from the schools. I spoke with board members and administrators, and they were unaware of this fact, and they have no involvement when it comes to inspections anyway. So this has nothing to do with anything they have going on at the school. On top of that, the names of the children on the rental properties aren't even a requirement for the schools. So the excuse that this is part of that to help the schools, it doesn't serve a purpose anymore. The school doesn't actually require that. So contrary to the belief of what's being told. So we're adding it in there, which makes it uncomfortable for a lot of adults and parents as well.
And what kind of problems, has this created for landlords and tenants? This kind of rushed process with all these different sort of requirements and tight deadlines.
I mean, I say it's too short a timeline to respond, and it's very little leeway based on what people are saying and how they're struggling to give answers for half of this stuff anyway. It's been very harsh punishments threatening to be rolled out just in the first year, given that many are still not certain what to even do, how to respond, or even assuming that we have a little bit of margin of error here for a first year rollout to assume that some people are going to possibly violate this, but by accident, not maliciously. First years of a program are meant to be providing grace and some understanding instead of just harsh punishments right off the bat. And we've heard them announce in council meetings that those fines and violations are going to be going out. So they're open about not giving a lot of leeway to this.
Yeah, and it sort of goes back to what Lee was saying, that it puts tenants in kind of a different subclass of people and sort of setting them aside from everyone else for more scrutiny. So Rebecca, I know that you consider that the $100 per unit cost to be kind of a special renter tax. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would consider it a special renters tax for sure. And I think that especially in a borough like Morrisville that thrives on renters, it just makes a lot less sense when it comes down to that.
And if this is costing $100 an inspection, so who is making the money from this and how much is coming in? Like, let's get down to brass tacks here.
Well, it's $100 per inspection. They really weren't upfront about where the money was going. We asked them at one of the council meetings, and kind of in a sidebar, Helen talked to who's the Borough Council president, talked to the borough manager and said they kind of had a sidebar to figure that out. And they finally said, "Oh, well, we're getting 50% of it." So what they're saying is that the borough's keeping 50%, which is where you go with the tax. They're not doing anything. They're getting 50% of the money to do what they want, and the other 50% is going to the company, which is the code enforcement uh, owner's company. So when you think of that, I mean, it may be a split, and so it's a way for them just to get more money in that way. I don't know if that's true, which again is what Helen said at one of the meetings, the Borough Council president. If that's true, I don't know how long the inspector is going to be willing to continue to take $50 an inspection. So you probably expect that money to go up. But if 45% of our people in town are renters, okay, so that means 45% of the homes. So I mean, that could mean $100 a pop could mean easily an extra $200,000 to $400,000 a year that's going into this, whether their company's getting it or not. And so it basically becomes a monopoly. I mean, here's the letter. I'm looking at it right now, and again, on the back it asks for the names of all the children in the house, but the front there's the letter, and it's signed by Helen, who is the Borough Council president, and it's signed by the building code enforcement officer, who's getting the money. So I mean, it almost is kind of a deal between these folks, and Helen's really pushing this. I mean, and she put out a brochure in April when she was going for election with the primary, and said, this is what we want you to know. And one of the things was calling the landlords in town slumlords, which really I don't think was fair. But at the bottom, she said, these are the people that I want on my team. I have on my team, and they're all current council members. It was Helen, Dennis, and Luke. So she's basically saying vote for those folks. So I mean, they're the people that want to push this, and I've had and all of them have made comments. All three of those have made comments at the Borough Council meeting supporting this program. I don't think they're necessarily bad people, but I just think it's a bad idea. I mean, it looks like it's about the money, but as I said, they're doing the inspections, and my friends had the inspections done. They didn't find much wrong. So I mean, we need to find something else, because this isn't finding landlords that aren't doing UNOs. If they're not doing UNOs, they're not going to say, "Oh, here I am. Please inspect my property every year." So they say the problem is safety, and we want to find landlords who aren't involved, but this doesn't do it.
And I also find it quite concerning, looking over that handout during one of the meetings, that I noticed at the bottom of it, it stated that the cost can be raised by certain people at any given year. And that to me raised big alarms. I challenged the council a month or two ago to place a reasonable cap limit on this fee as maybe a sign of good faith. If you really want people to believe that this is not about the money, this is really about safety, put a cap on it. There should not be a concern that this could be raised so much that it can push out renters in terms of affordability. And there's no reason not to. Why would the cost of this inspection need to go up for somebody to walk through someone's home with a checklist? Why should that go up in 5 years, 10, 20 years from now to do the exact same thing anyway? So a reasonable cap wouldn't be too much to ask, and would have been a sign of good faith and not acknowledged.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of these kinds of inspections either, and was surprised when these letters started showing up. And I'm sure it caused confusion for tenants, and maybe led to some people just paying for things in a panic, as well as confusion, not understanding, what the penalties were. So we're in Q4 here. We're closing out the end of the year. So it's, this went out in February. So we're coming up on like the end of the year. How is this all working out? Like, looking back, what are the takeaways?
Well, 45% of the population are renters, and so the numbers that we've seen do not suggest that they've had a great response. And I think they've sent out a third batch of letters. So, I mean, each batch of letters they sent out costs money to mail them out, send them out, try to get responses back. And the fact that they're sending out these, notices of violation means they're not doing real well on it. It just is a real problem. I mean, one other thing we didn't mention earlier, I don't know, maybe Shawn, you want to mention this. I think you talked about this. They tried to promote this on the fact that everybody else is doing it. I mean, Shawn, do you want to pick that up? Because you have some of the stats there.
Yeah, I mean, not surprisingly, looking into this, when it comes to who directly around us is doing similar things like that, the answer was pretty much none. I think the exception of this being Bristol Borough. Several people looked into it and reached out to some of the neighboring counties around Morrisville with these special renters inspections, and not a thing in Philadelphia, Yardley, Lower Makefield Township, Falls Township, Bristol Borough, or sorry, Bristol Township, Tullytown, Bensalem, not even Trevose. And I know I've had friends and family in a lot of those areas too. Council tried naming a few examples the last time this had come up, but it was a reach for some areas that were really outside of our direct neighbors. And still, there's a very few and far between examples in that particular case. Even Bristol Borough, what I think was kind of laughably funny about this was they do theirs biannually. So theirs is at least every 2 years as opposed to yearly, which even they knew this was excessive to force down everyone to do every year at this point, knowing that it was not something that even Bristol Borough wanted to accept. And they're the only other ones not doing it on a 3 to 5 year basis.
Yeah, and in 5 years, I mean, even a place like Boston, which is a really humongous city. I mean, they happen to do it. They do it every 5 years. Not every year at all. And I mean, let's face it, tenants usually move between 3 to 5 years. I mean, there are some that stay longer, but so if they're moving within 3 to 5 years, they're not inspecting them at all. Until they get the UNO, which is reasonable. So I think we really need to, so I made a proposal. I think we really need to beef up the UNO code and probably leave go of this annual inspection thing, or make some more or other adaptation because it's not working for what we needed. We wanted to propose that to the Borough Council, and they wouldn't give us any time beforehand to do that. I mean, they let other people like Imagine Morrisville and about new tennis courts and library representatives and everything else, but they wouldn't give us any ability to suggest to them. They simply said, go talk to the code enforcement officer and get code enforcement to endorse it, then we'll talk to you. But the code enforcement guys are the one that are getting $200,000 to $400,000 a year from this. So, I mean, if they endorse something that's going to change this or blow it up, there goes a lot of money. And so, I mean, maybe they'd be fair, maybe they'd give objective comments, but that would be hard for them, I would say.
And it sounds like from what you're saying, Lee, that this could potentially be libelous. I mean, have any of these towns who were doing yearly inspections been taken to court over this?
Well, they have. I mean, right now, Pottstown, they went back and forth. They stopped it, then they allowed them to go forth again. So the Institute for Justice is litigating it there. They've litigated in a number of towns, across the United States. And frankly, I'd like to. I mean, not us, but I'd like somebody to get this case to the Supreme Court, because I don't think the Supreme Court would make the same decision they did in 1967 that you need administrative warrants. I think they would give protections to renters just like just like homeowners. I think they threw the whole thing out. There was one case where the town lost and they had to pay back all the fees to all the landlords. It cost them a lot of money. So, I mean, it's risky, I think.
And
I
from
think it's
listening to you talk, I know that you and I spoke offline that you have a proposed solution to kind of fix these issues,
Right.
which is rewriting the town's UNO policy to better sort of meet their goal of enhancing safety at Morrisville homes and making sure that things are up to code and not a lot of violations. That would sound like a win-win for everyone. So have you been able to present any of this? I know that you said that at town council meetings are not really giving you airtime, but have you been able to present this to the borough manager, Jim Dillon?
I sat down with them for a half hour and I told him we wanted to do this and present it to him. I said, please give me back your feedback. And he hasn't given me any feedback back on it at all. So finally I wrote to Helen, the Borough Council president, and said, I'd like to do this. We would like to do it. The Morrisville Landlord-Tenant Coalition would like to do this before, and present this to you. And she wrote back. In fact, I got the comment here. She wrote back in her reply, any issues you have with the rental inspection program should be taken up with Barry Ison, which is the company that does all the inspections.
Yeah.
Any suggested UNO changes would come from the code department. You are always welcome to speak during public comment, which is 3 minutes at the end of the meeting. So at any rate, I was going to be put off. So I got one of my other landlords, and the two of us each took 3 minutes, took us 6 minutes, and we told them what this was about. But it wasn't anywhere near what we should have proposed, been able to have with them, because we wanted a back and forth where they could ask questions. And actually, a couple of them interrupted us to my surprise and asked a couple of questions. But when you're given 6 minutes at the tail end of the meeting at 8:45, people aren't going to listen to it. It's not serious. And again, I have not talked to the actual code enforcement folks. Again, they're making a lot of money off this. I think they would be supportive of the first part of the plan, which is to, and we can talk about that later on, but I some things that I think they would be good on, but I have a hard time thinking that they're going to say, stop these inspections. I mean, if you go online, the places that are against the inspections are the tenants and landlords and other people in the borough and so forth in these boroughs. But the inspection companies have all of these reasons why you need to have inspections, because they're making tons of money off of it. Jim actually responded one time, said I was giving self-serving pontifications. Well, that's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to. They think for me it's great. It's not. I really feel strongly that the tenants deserve the privacy, and I think we need to do UNOs and make sure we get them right, and we need to forget this annual inspection deal, because you're not getting many corrections being done, and you're inspecting these properties regularly anyway. It's really about safety. Do the homeowners, but they'll never do that.
Well, I mean, I can feel your passion just talking to you about it, Lee, that just the inconvenience it causes to tenants, and it really does make them kind of like a subclass of people who are subjected to more scrutiny than people who own their home that may or may not be kept in good repair. I think we all know there are plenty of houses in Morrisville that are owner occupied that are not being well maintained and would definitely not pass a UNO inspection. But it sounds like you and your group are, you're facing some headwinds. You've got some opposition every step of the way when you're trying to present these solutions. And we're going to talk about that in part 2 of this podcast. So thank you for your insight on the matter. Thank you for joining us, Lee and Rebecca, as well as Shawn. And definitely go over and listen to part 2 of this, where we talk about, we presented the problem, but we also are going to present the solution. So stay tuned for that in the next episode of Your Voice, Our Morrisville. Thank you.